Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about playing games as intended. Sorry, I've been watching way too much Food Wishes with Chef John. I will stop talking like that, I promise. I want to talk about playing games as intended. This came from a question I got, and I answered it, and then I thought, I need to go into more detail. So Abel Anderson asked, Tim, I have a serious question. I just started Kingdom Come Deliverance for the first time, and after about an hour of playing, I immediately modded out the inventory weight limit and the limited saves feature. As a developer, do you think I've robbed myself of some of the intended experience that the developer had for me? Have I lost something by doing this? Why do I have a feeling like I don't even want to play the game if saves are limited and inventory weight is very low? Is there something wrong with me as a player? I want to let you know, I immediately answered and said, first off, there's nothing wrong with you as a player. You should play how you want. That's pretty much the TLDR of this video. But I wanted to make a video with a longer, more nuanced, I haven't said that word in a while, have I? Answer. Because, first of all, I have a video that's called Intent. Every video I mention, I'll link below in the description. But that video is more about how people interpret games versus what the developers intended. Because guess what? You can interpret a game any way you want, but only the developer can tell you what they intended. They're different things. It's weird that people think that intent lies with them, the viewer or the player. No, interpretation lies with you. Intent is with the developer. So let's dive into this question of playing games as intended, with keeping in mind that I basically said at the very beginning, just play a game however you want. It's up to you. But let me tell you a story about a friend of mine and a coworker, because what would be a Tim Kaine video without a story? I've known him for, probably over 20 years, probably close to 30. Anyway, he plays games on easy mode all the time. In fact, if it has an even easier mode, like if it has a story mode, where pretty much you can't die in combat, he'll play it that way. And the reason for this is he doesn't play games to be challenged. He doesn't play a game to be stressed. I know a lot of you love that. You view a video game as a challenge. He doesn't. He likes going through and looking at the game. He loves level design. He loves art. He likes looking at the vistas that some of these games provide. To a lesser extent, he likes playing through the story. But really, he's there to see what world did they make. I just want to see it, and literally see it. That's what he wants to do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Despite the fact that if I've heard people tell him he wasn't playing the game right, there is no playing a game right. If he's playing that game and enjoying it, and he thinks he got his money's worth for doing it that way, rock on. That is certainly the right way for him to play a game. We could go on and talk about, if a game provides difficulty settings. I have a whole video about that, and there were people who saying, no, you should pick a difficulty and go with it, and other people going, no. Let me decide how difficult I want your game to be. I can see both sides of that. Neither one is right. I play with colorblindness settings because it's an accessibility feature. I can't play your game without it. So if you're going to provide them, I'll use them. If you don't provide them, I will assume there's not a single thing in your game that requires color. Because if there is, then you just broke the intent. You intended for anyone to be able to play your game. You didn't provide color blindness settings, but I can't play your game because there's a puzzle that requires color, or there's a UI element that uses color. So with that developer providing intent does come a responsibility to the player that your game is playable without those features. For example, the original question mentioned getting rid of the save limit. Look, if a game lets you save anywhere, which all of my games do, then you can choose to save scum, and a lot of people do. Before they pick that lock, they save. Before they go into a combat, they save. Before they try to sneak past a guard, they save. I'm fine with you playing that way. It's up to you. What do you want to do? So these are all things, though, that I'm talking about that the developer provided you. So these are as intended. But the original question was about mods, so let's talk about mods. And I I've mentioned I like mods. I like the modding community. I have a whole video on mods. But as I've mentioned extensively, seemingly to the shock and surprise of many people, the player base out there is not monolithic. People want different features. Sometimes they conflict on features, and this can be anything from, I have videos on fast travel, quest markers, multiple ones on encumbrance. Some people will say, if the game has that feature, I won't play it. Other people are saying, if the game doesn't have that feature, I won't play it. I mean, there are extremes on both sides. So once you accept that, okay, there's no way you can offer a feature and make every single person in the player base happy, this is where mods come in. Because mods let people change the game, your game, to be how they want. So rather than try to ship a one-size-fits-all game, which I think is a hopeless thing to try to do, people can just mod it, and then they can get the game they want. Some games aren't moddable, and I have a whole video about the cost of moddability, and basically it takes developer time to make their game moddable, and I talk about all the different ways you can make a game moddable. Some games aren't moddable. As soon as though a developer decides to make their games moddable, then almost by definition, their intent is for you to mod it. So they can't claim, oh, I'm really surprised anybody's modding this game. You made it moddable. Mods, especially out there, can be used to fix bugs or make skills and abilities in the game work correctly. In other words, as the developer intended and not how the shipped product had it. That exists in many of my games. However, modders often change a game's content or restore content that the developer decided to remove, or they change mechanics that they're not sure the majority of people want. These are not what the developer intended. So while a developer may have made their game moddable and intended it to be modded, you can't hold the developer responsible for what an actual patch contains. So yes, to answer OP's question, if you mod your game, you are missing out on what the developer intended. But only you know whether or not that bothers you. So if you talk about this game with other players, you may find that their experience is fundamentally different than yours. Is that going to bother you? Are you going to talk about content that isn't in the base, isn't in the unmodded game? Or are you going to have avoided content that wasn't that you should have seen, but the mod let you avoid? If people talk about how difficult it was to get into some place, but you're like, I modded all locks to be easy, you're going to miss out on some stuff. If you don't care about that, rock on, mod away. But I think some of you are going to be bothered if you mod the game to an extent that you're no longer playing the game that the developer intended you to play. So my recommendation, of course, would be, why don't you try playing the game one time without mods? Experience what the developer wanted you to experience before you mod it. Now, how far? However long you think it takes you to understand the game. For some of you, that would be doing an entire playthrough. Play the game 20, 30, 40 hours, whatever it takes to do a playthrough without any mods. For others of you, you can play for an hour or two and go, okay, I see what they mean. I see how I'm supposed to play this, but I'm not going to keep playing this unless I mod it. That's fine. Mod away those things that you find frustrating or stressful or confusing, or even mod in challenges if that's the thing you want to do. But I will say that I'm all for you modding a game to change it substantially into a different game, and some mods do that. They dramatically change a game's nature because it's yours to do what you want. But I think you are missing out a little bit if you don't at least see what the developer wanted you to play before you start modding it. And let me do a quick side note here on patches, because I've kind of mentioned patches a couple times. Developer patches are also playing the game as it's intended, even if they add content or even if they change mechanics, because it's coming from the developer. So it's obviously what they intended the game to be. Fan patches, you can consider them a patch if all they do is fix bugs. If they get rid of a crash, if something says it's supposed to be usable 3 times a day, but it's only usable 1 time a day, if they change that, That's a patch. However, I think a lot of fan patches go farther than that. They add content, even if it's removed content. They add their own content. They extend mechanics. They change mechanics to be what they would rather have instead. This is not a patch. This is a mod named a patch. And I think you should treat them as mods, at least for the purpose of the advice I'm giving here, which is try playing the game without that fan patch before you patch it. Ultimately, though, I think you should just play the game however you want. These are just my recommendations. And especially don't worry what other people think about how you play your game. Because remember, you are the Kevin James of how you play your games. I'm sorry, I promised I'd stop doing food wishes. Anyway, I hope that answered your question in more detail, Abel Anderson, and I hope the rest of you like that.